Before we begin, just a quick thing. I've got a website where I do reviews, I've got a gaming channel, and I'm also an author. My book's on Amazon, links in the description. Thanks a lot, let's begin.
What are we gonna do?
We're gonna kill every last one of them.
The prodigal daughter returns.
What do you want from me?
The last instalment of this long and perplexing series was announced to have been in the works as early as September 2012 by the head of Sony Pictures Distribution. In December 2012, Paul Anderson confirmed that he would be directing the sixth film, and 6 months later, Milla Jovovich announced that the last film was slated for release in September 2014, with filming to begin in late 2013 after Anderson had finished his work on Pompeii. Production was put on hold after Jovovich and Anderson announced that they were having a second child. Principal photography began on September 18, 2015 in South Africa, with further filming taking place in Australia at Village Roadshow Studios in the Gold Coast, as well as Brisbane and Magnetic Island. Filming ended on December 9, 2015. Unlike the previous two installments, the final chapter was filmed in 2D and converted to 3D in post-production. So this is it! The finale, the swan song. Was it worth it? To switch things up for the final video in this series, we'll go through the film from start to finish because the final chapter is a total clusterfuck, continuity-wise. The final chapter starts with a little history lesson into the origins of the Umbrella Corporation. Dr. James Marcus is revealed to be the founder of the Umbrella Corporation, and his daughter Alicia suffers from progeria, a degenerative condition that causes premature aging. To save her life, Marcus creates the T-virus, but in testing, the virus will... well, we all know what the T-virus does. Marcus is partnered with Dr. Alexander Isaacs, and he doesn't like the idea of the project being shut down, and so orders Wesker to kill Marcus, and then adopts Alicia, taking over Umbrella in the process. Isaacs then creates an AI computer in Alicia's likeness, the Red Queen. Why are we getting a whole new backstory to the origins of the T-virus? Did Paul forget that in his universe, Dr. Charles Ashford created the T-virus to help his daughter Angie? When Alice emerges in Washington, where are the entire entourage of Resident Evil characters that were with her? The film doesn't mention where they are or what happened to them. On the fan-made Wikipedia page, Leon, Ada and Jill are listed as deceased, as when Wesker gathered the group at the White House, he then destroyed it somehow with himself still inside and only he and Alice survived. Kind of a cop-out when you just plain didn't ask them back. Alice then meets the Red Queen, and if Wesker managed to make it look like he was helping Alice in defiance of the Red Queen, then Red Queen certainly didn't look innocent.
Capture if possible, terminate if necessary.
The Red Queen mentions that Wesker pretended to give Alice her powers back.
Wesker, he led you all here to Washington. He pretended to give you your powers back. And then he betrayed you.
Why? I suspect that Wesker really did give Alice her powers back as a sequel hook, but then when it came time for the next film and it was decided that it would be the last, the final battle would be piss easy for Alice if she had her telekinesis, so lo and behold, Wesker pretended to give Alice her powers. Anyway, Alice is tasked with reaching the hive in 48 hours to retrieve and release an airborne antivirus that Umbrella developed and have presumably been sitting on this whole time. Overall, I'm not impressed with how this film is paced. Alice is knocked unconscious a couple of times, and that's only to justify a scene transition and pushing her deadline forward a bit more. Alice is then abducted in a massive armoured vehicle that is commanded by a familiar face. Remember Dr. Isaacs from Apocalypse and Extinction? Well, it seems that Isaacs was cloned as well, and this version of him is super religious and completely bonkers, and here we learn that the Isaacs that Alice killed 3 films ago was a clone. Alice has a mini fight with this Isaacs and escapes on a motorcycle. Time for a tangent. I'm not surprised that I can't find a timeline for this series because it's all over the place with almost no correlation to what happens to the characters. So if there's 10 years between the events of the first film and Apocalypse, because those are only about a week apart, then there's instantly 5 years between Apocalypse and Extinction, and then things get a bit sketchy. Wikipedia tells me that Afterlife takes place 1 year after Extinction, but this little tidbit tells me it's 4 years, which seems a bit over the top, but it doesn't say when this is from. Is it 4 years since the end of Extinction, or 4 years since the outbreak in Raccoon City? Because in Extinction, Alice says this.
5 years. I want to keep the sand back.
That clearly implies that it's been 5 years since the end of Apocalypse, and now at the start of Afterlife, it's been 4 years, and even Afterlife jumps forward another 6 months. God knows how long it's been between Afterlife and Retribution. Alice could have been locked up in that cell for fucking months. I'm thinking that if it's been 4 years since the end of Extinction, then that would make more sense in respect to the timeline. That means that we're now 9 years in, and Afterlife then jumps forward 6 months, and even spreading the events of the end of Afterlife through Retribution and to the end of the final chapter over the remaining 6 months of the timeline is pushing it. The problem is that through the events of the last 3 films, logically it must all take place over a couple of days. I'm not getting the sensation that a great deal of time has passed. And then we're reintroduced to Claire Redfield, who's holed up in the ruins of Raccoon City with a load of survivors. A whole battle later, Alice, Claire, Doc, Razor and Abigail reach the Hive. They're met with the Red Queen, who plays them a video of Dr. Isaacs addressing the board of Umbrella executives. He mentions how the world is in dire straits due to the numerous issues including global warming and overpopulation, and in true Resident Evil fashion, he offers the most evil and stupid solution to humanity's problems.
I propose that we end the world, but on our terms. An orchestrated apocalypse.
You what? Well, I suppose humanity can't have any problems if humanity doesn't exist. Then that antivirus that you're protecting must be for when the last human settlements have been wiped out in the very precise amount of time. That's another thing. Towards the end, the time on Alice's watch shows that there are only a few minutes until the last human settlements fall, but what happens at 0? Are there a load of Umbrella or armoured vehicles parked outside each outpost with orders to shoot at a very specific time unless told otherwise? This little mystery is never explained.
I was created to serve the Umbrella Corporation, but I was also programmed to value human life.
Dr. Isaacs created a powerful artificial intelligence. Isaacs called the computer the Red Queen.
Working her way through the Hive, Razor dies and Alice is separated from Claire, but together with Doc they find the cryopods where the Umbrella Elite are waiting out the apocalypse. The two plant explosives using the equipment that was left over from the first film, which would have been a nice little touch if I could remember if they left anything. Let's say that they did bring a massive bag of explosives with them. They already had the mechanism to fry the Red Queen circuits, and the doors were set to close and seal the Hive forever in a set amount of time, so why did they need a massive bag of explosives? It seems like they already had everything covered. Now comes the big reveal. Alice meets the original Dr. Isaacs, who's been awoken by Wesker, and he's got a few home truths. We'll get the really obvious one out of the way first. The Red Queen warned Alice that there's a traitor amongst them, and of course it's Doc, and we knew that because of the very reason that Alice gave.
How did you know it was me?
You're still alive.
Don't let the fact that he's boffing Claire cloud your judgment. Here it is, the answer to why we don't know a single thing about Alice's past, and I'll be honest, I was surprised. Alice herself is a clone of Alicia Marcus, who is still alive, and she was the one who uploaded the video of Isaac saying that he wants to kill the world to the server. I'll just say that Alice being a clone of Alicia Marcus, who's played by Mila Jovovich, and the Red Queen being played by Jovovich and Anderson's daughter Eva, was a nice touch, and I thought she did very well as the Red Queen. All that aside, I have points to make. Isaacs mentions that Alice remembers nothing before the mansion when she was created 10 years before. When he says the mansion, I assume that he means the events of the first film when Alice did have memory loss, but remember how she remembered stuff from before the mansion, like talking to Matt's sister? My beef with this twist goes deeper. Remember in Extinction when Isaacs was moaning about using clones of Alice in an attempt to use her blood to create a serum that would domesticate the zombies? They needn't have bothered if Umbrella was sitting on an airborne antivirus that Wesker should have known about since he was the chairman, but never mind. Why is he moaning about using clones when the real Alice is actually a clone anyway? Is it because all the other Alices were clones of a clone and that's just ridiculous? Now I know what you're thinking. The The Red Queen does point out that Alice's genetic material was altered so that she wouldn't develop progeria, so maybe this alteration to her genetics made her bond with the virus, but this wasn't passed on to the numerous Alice clones, which was why Isaacs needed the real Alice. Bullshit. Because the clones didn't seem to have a problem with getting Alice's abilities, which meant they were bonding just fine. So again, why weren't the clones good enough for the serum? And now we come to the final and ultimate fuck you to the series' continuity. Alicia opens the hostilities by firing Wesker, which allows the Red Queen to somehow crush his legs in the door, which also somehow leads to blood coming out of his mouth. Alice hands him the detonator to the bombs, which doesn't seem like a very smart move, because since he's dying anyway, all he has to do is let go and the antivirus will be destroyed along with everyone and everything else. Before she pursues Isaacs, Alicia very clearly tells Alice that the antivirus will kill all organisms infected with the T-virus. Okay, now cast your minds back to the beginning of Afterlife. Well, you don't have to because I'll play the clip for you.
The serum I've injected you with is neutralizing the T cells within your body. Put simply, the Umbrella Corporation is taking back its property.
Did you hear that? Wesker very clearly said that the serum that he injected her with was neutralizing the T cells in her body, and the only way that we can take that is that Alice is now totally infection-free. And now fast forward to the end of Retribution when this happens.
You were the only one to successfully bond with the T-virus. Well, now I have need of you, the old you. So I've given you back your gift.
Did you catch that? He's given her back her gift, and her pupils dilate, which shows that her telekinesis has returned. So it was the T-virus that he injected her with. And now fast forward again to the beginning of the final chapter.
Wesker, he led you all here to Washington. He pretended to give you your powers back. And then he betrayed you.
You fucking what? After the boss fight with Isaacs in the laser room where Alice gets a few fingers lasered off, she manages to defeat him and get the antivirus, then makes her way to the surface. The crazy Isaacs clone approaches Alice with an army of undead and meets the real Isaacs only to stab the shit out of him for what seems to be sheer bewilderment. As Wesker finally lets go of the trigger and the bombs go off, killing Wesker, Alicia and the Umbrella Elite, Alice releases the antivirus and sure enough all the zombies fall down dead in a manner that resembles a Mexican wave, and then Alice falls down presumably dead. The next morning, Alice is awoken by Claire, who somehow escaped the exploding underground base, and this last bit makes no sense. Apparently, everyone's worried because this antivirus will kill anyone infected with the T-virus, and also apparently, Alice is infected but without her abilities. What kind of fucked up version of the T-virus was she infected with? Whatever, I'm done doing mental gymnastics with this fucking franchise. She's infection-free now, but as far as I'm concerned, she has been since the start of Afterlife. So there. The last bit is actually quite nice. Not the part where the Red Queen said that it and Alicia made Alice think that she would die was a test.
We had to know if you were willing to make the sacrifice, to give up your life for others. This was something no one at Umbrella would have done.
What difference does it make? Umbrella's finished. Anyway, Alicia downloaded her memories for Alice and now she has access to the childhood that she never had. It was actually done really well and quite emotional, especially since this involves a character who has never expressed a desire to retrieve any lost memories or a desire for a childhood. The film ends with Alice saying that the antivirus could take years to reach every corner of the earth, and until then, her work is not done, and she signs off with her famous catchphrase.
My name is Alice.
Resident Evil, the final chapter, had a budget of $40 million and made $312.2 million at the box office, which makes the final Resident Evil film the most successful financially. Critically, it wasn't anything special. You know the drill, nice visuals, but it didn't make any fucking sense. Obviously not in those exact words. One big criticism was something that I pointed out was the decision to not bring back any Resident Evil characters that haven't already been killed off. No Jill, no Leon, no Ada, and no Chris. Wouldn't it have been super cool for the fans to have a final battle involving a super proud smackdown with all the Resident Evil characters? That would have been awesome. Instead we got Alice and Claire and that's it. The whole point of starting this series was to figure out why Resident Evil was so popular and made $1.2 billion over 15 years and 6 films. I think the appeal is the same as the games. The action in the games and the films is flawless, but they're stupidly written.
I've sent my right hand to dispose of you.
Your right hand comes off?
Waiting for a written invitation?
In that way, the two complement each other. Can anyone honestly tell me the plot of the games from start to finish? It's so overblown and convoluted to the point where it can just go on forever and I'll still play them. Resident Evil 4 is one of my favourite games ever, and will I still watch the films and enjoy them? Fuck yeah. To finish, I would say that stupid, poorly written, and contradictory plots belong in the Resident Evil games because the fun gameplay is what I signed up for. The Resident Evil films managed to distract the audience from the atrocious story in the same way the games did, to the point where people kept turning up no matter how bad it got. At least it's over now. Done. Finished. Never to be repeated. Oh, for fuck's sake.